I'm a Pokemon fan, an artist, and a dunce. But we're focusing on the first two today. Most Pokemon fans that can draw have at least had the thought of making a Fakemon, and with me, that takes up a lot of my free time. Some time ago, I decided to start working on my own fan concept for a Pokemon game, and came up with a lot of ideas for new Fakemon to pack the region with. Speaking of said region, we'll delve into that in a later video, but all you need to know is that it's the entirety of North and South America, rolled into one massive continent of a region similar to how they were positioned during the days of Pangea. If that doesn't make sense, it will eventually. And since for the past few generations, Game Freak has been taking the origins of their Pokemon from the area from which the regions are based on, I'll be doing the same thing with the Pokemon having inspiration from North and South America alike. And with all that said, please like, subscribe, and welcome to the start of Pokemon Terrestrial Takeover. And like every Pokemon game, we're going to start this Fakemon concept region with the starters! And since starter Pokemon are like a child's first pet, I took the liberty to design each one after common pets, specifically cats, snakes, and birds. So, after choosing a player character, you'll be taken to the lab of one Professor Hickory. It'll be there where you're given the option to choose between Splinteron, Coilash, and Squall. And before anyone starts complaining in the comments about me stealing the concept of a grass cat and a water bird from Quaxley and Sprigatito, I did it first. I have older and frankly much worse art on my Twitter that I posted back in January of 2022, so shut it. But enough of that, time for the fun part. Splinteron is a pure grass type starter with a design inspiration taken from several cubs of big cats from around the world. Tigers, lions, and cougars in particular. The lion will be a lot more obvious later, so for now, let's focus on the tiger and cougar aspects. Like this stripe on its back. Clearly a nod to the famous tiger stripes, but also how young cougars are decorated with patterns for a touch of camouflage. Not to mention how plenty of house cats have stripe patterns as well. Now for the elephant in the room. What exactly are Splinteron's wooden whiskers and tail about? Well, there are two North American cryptids I'd like to bring to light. The first being the Splinter Cat, which is what Splinteron's lion is mainly based off of. The Splinter Cat is a ferocious beast said to inhabit the forests of northern United States and southern Canada. It'll charge into trees at breakneck speeds, blasting the back of them out from pure force, splintering the wood and leaving a ghostly vestige of the tree trunk in its wake. But instead of bashing its head in, Splinter just runs face first into busted trees as the evolved form knocked down, and that's how it got splinters lodged in its cheeks. It's pretty similar to how animals will attack porcupines even though they have no shot of doing anything to them. Especially when it's a pet dog or cat, I mean, yeesh. I mean, I feel bad for them, but come on, you're a little bit stupid for doing that. However, cougars are one of the only animal that can actually attack and eat porcupine without getting, that. So that's a plus. But Splinter don't mind the splinters in their face because their pain receptors don't really work. It's kind of like how you can build a pain tolerance, except, they're kind of born with it. In their face. They also like how it makes them look like they're fully evolved form, so they're like adorable little copycats. Literally. Kind of how a cougar and a ball-tailed cat are pretty much the same thing. That's the other cryptid, by the way. The ball-tailed cat. It's basically a cougar with a super long tail and a weird ball with a barb in it on the end. It's kind of cool, I guess. But we'll come back to that later. Oh, I have to do Splinton's name, don't I? Well, it's just Splinter, split like how a Splinter Cat would split a tree, and Kitten. It's a pretty easy namesake. Unlike Coilash, a coiling coral snake that's lashing about, kicking up ash, getting road rash, and Aspis. Don't judge me, I ran out of tie-ins. Either way, yeah, it's a coil-up snake and it's in the shape of a bike tire. Literal road snakes do exist. They're those weird tar lines in the asphalt that keep cracks from worsening whenever they get wet or something. But why the hell is it a bike tire? Well, have you ever heard of a hoop snake? It's this old legend from the southwestern United States and Mexico about the snake biting its own tail and dashing after its prey like a rolling tire. I really like how this one turned out, and a lot of you guys agree from the look of this community post. Coilash will generate thermal heat whenever it rolls by time, that's why it's a fire type. And that's what these glowy red bits on its back and neck are, it's just thermal energy. I thought about making it lava for a while, but I just didn't like the idea. It's like how core engines will get really hot whenever they're in use, and how most metal will start burning bright red whenever it's superheated. But more stuff about roads and tires though. These yellow markings resemble a typical painted line on a road center and those road signs that warn whenever the road has a curve to it. If they didn't have those, there'd probably be a lot more people who wipe out on like a motorcycle or a normal bicycle for that matter and get road rash. Cough, cough, obvious transition like Coilash's face. Cough, cough. Sorry about that. Plenty of snakes have markings like these, but I've heard a person in passing conversation call a road rash a snake rash. but I don't know if that was a real thing or if that's just what that person called it. But speaking of skin, coral snakes and milk snakes both have red, black, and yellow skin. Or scales. Yeah, that still works. But these are two snakes that will be shown in bioscience classes, like biology. They demonstrate biomimicry, where one animal evolves to resemble another animal to fool predators into not hurting it, even though it's harmless. These two little guys are all across the western continents, and since Coilash's final evolved form does have some poison properties, I thought it made sense because Coilash doesn't exactly have poison properties itself yet. Hell, if it was venomous, that'd be a horrible idea to give to children. Funny, but a bad idea. But its usual cool factor makes it very popular among these trainers, and like I said, my community. But those who want to calm our Pokemon have the option of Squallet. Squallet is a crested auklet that lives in squall areas and constantly squawks. It's like a toddler making a bunch of noise just because it feels like it. It's not upset, it doesn't want anything, it's just annoying. But I mentioned something called a squall earlier, and those are sudden increases in wind that come right before some kind of storm, typically rain. Crested auklets, however, make their home in the northern Pacific Ocean, in the Bering Sea. They can occasionally be found in parts of Canada as well, and even as far east as Greenland. All auklets are seabirds, but I wanted the crested auklet specifically, just so it had that signature plume on Squallet. And if that plume was straightened out on Squallet, it'd be in the shape of a raindrop. And by the way, rain is a massive part of this Pokemon's evolutionary line. That being two Aztec gods from Aztec mythology, and, fair warning, I probably will butcher their names, the Talak and the Opoctali. I'll talk more about them later, but I wanted each starter to have an inspiration based on a myth from certain areas. Coilash's Hoopsnake is from the United States, Splint and Splintercat is from Canada, and then of course Squall has the Aztec myths. But what the frick does an Aztec god have to do with anything with a seabird from Alaska? Well, crested auklets have been spotted in Mexico on occasion. It's not the most sound logic, but I just need a seabird to base the base form off of. Base the base form, that sounded weird. And speaking of seabirds, that's a kind of plane. Not the plane that matters in this context, that would be the Piper PA-23, otherwise known as the Aztec. See where I'm going with this? But other than being a bird, that's another reason why Squallet's a flying type. Which kinda messes with the type triangle with Squallet resisting Splinton's grass moves, but all that changes once our starters evolve. Starting with a grass and electric type, Sabercore. Oh, look at him, he's starting to grow a little electric lion mane. It's not that strong yet, of course, since all that electric power has come from electric nerve signals that just built up over time when it was a Splinton. Those splinters in its cheeks did trigger pain receptors, but they just didn't work. At no point did they actually send electric signals to Splinton's brain and built up around its neck instead when it evolved. Its tiger stripes even look like lightning bolts now. Fun! Now let's interject another thing about tigers. Like the Smilodon, or more commonly known as the saber-toothed tiger. They were all over the western continents during the Ice Age, and it tied in pretty well with the whole theme of big cats and the whole wood motif of this line. And wooden teeth are a thing, I guess, with their first use being traced back to the 1500s in Japan. And even with the super regional based designs, Game Freak will still sneak in Japanese inspirations here and there. Now for something unrelated. Persia was an empire from the past that originated in the modern day Iran, and they had a myth about this creature known as a manticore. It was a beast with the head of a man, the body of a lion, and the tail of a scorpion or something like a snake, but we're using scorpion. That worked pretty well for Sabercore's design already, and I just had to translate the scorpion tail into some other kind of tail. Making it like a hook shape was pretty easy, but why does the tail look so fluffy? Well, the answer to that is, it's not! It's thousands of tiny little splinters. They don't do it very often since it's more like a last resort kind of method, but Sabercore will fling the needles on their tail around kinda like an attack. Maybe there's like a needle tail move there, maybe like needle arm or something, I don't know. They'll maybe do it on accident sometimes too, kinda how like normal cats will sway their tails about, kinda like the Persian cat, a cat with a notoriously fluffy tail. You see the connection of a Persian myth with an iconic tail, and a cat literally called Persian with another iconic tail? I love that! Also, the Manticore is also called the Man-Tiger, so that's another fun one. And its name just comes from Sabertooth, Manticore, and core, like a battery core. Cars also have batteries. Cars also have tires. And Sirpigeon, the circular serpent with the qualities of an engine, is a tire! Albeit a flaming one that goes bouncing across the movie screens whenever something goes boom, but a tire nonetheless. Coilash built up so much thermal energy in its body by spinning at high speeds, eventually becoming too great to contain. That heat bursts out into a flaming ball of fire when its evolution process begins, using Coilash's molten skin that's very similar to tire shreds you can see on the sides of the roads as fuel for the fire. Speaking of those bits of tire shreds, they fall off whenever they get too worn, and that's why Sirpigeon isn't nearly as proportionally long as its pre-evolved form. See this darker patch of scales? It's just extra fuel for the fire. It's not actual skin and bone, so it doesn't bother Sirpigeon when it burns. And it lasts a while, referencing how burning rubber takes forever. And speaking of burning rubber, that's another car thing! It's a term that means driving really fast, like whenever people are racing their cars. So I gave Sirpigeon old-timey racing goggles like they used back in the day before this pesky thing called safety standards started butting in. The only thing left to talk about is the engine exhaust pipe on its head. It's clear this family has an automotive theme, so it makes sense that engines were included somewhere. And I mean, Sirpigeon? It's right there in the name. But it's also an example of evolutionary adaptation in the real world. Sirpigeon's excess body heat actually has a place to escape now, whereas Koyash's didn't, making it go boom in the first place. But not that it needs that now, so great. Staying with the trend of engines and vehicles though, earlier I mentioned how Squall is based off a plane called the Aztec. But what I neglected to say is that plane's been used in several different naval branches across several different countries, albeit in small numbers for a short while. So I wanted the remainder of Squall's family to have at least some loose ties to military planes. Take Koshin for example. I wanted to make sure I kept the relations to the Aztec culture, but there aren't exactly too many military planes named after Aztecs. However, the 201st Fighter Squadron of the Mexican Air Force worked perfectly! The squadron used to fly P-47D Thunderbolts, a fighter bomber variety plane that was common in the days of World War II. And I bring up this squadron specifically thanks to their nickname, the Aztec Eagles. It works so well! And Koshin's beak, plume, and those little feathers under its chin are similar to the Thunderbird's propeller, having the prop stick out forward while having the blades to the sides. The slicked back hair and the patch of facial hair also give off the impression of a cocky young teenager that's trying to look cool, kind of like the full of themselves new recruit archetype in military movies. And these guys are super full of themselves. They try to hunt like their fully evolved form, diving into the ocean and spearing their prey with their beaks. But their big fluffy wings aren't aerodynamic enough to gain the needed speed, and its beak is too thick and dull to be an effective spear. They're meant to use their talons, but they refuse to because they're just in a slump and will get it eventually. Keep telling yourself that, pal. You'll get it someday. Oh, and speaking of the fluffy wings, when they're tucked away, it's like the puffy inside of an aviator jacket. And if you haven't noticed yet, each wing is partially split, making it look as though this Pokemon has 4 wings in all. I wanted to differentiate Koshin from Squall and their evolved form a little more, so I started looking at planes with a similar style to the Thunderbolts. I wound up thinking of biplanes, those 4-winged planes that are used for aerial performances. I think I thought of them mainly due to the heads and propellers of the two planes being fairly similar. But let's be honest, they're just kinda cool. And of course this Pokemon has a bunch of different bird species thrown into its design. Namely eagles, auklets, cranes, herons, and the most awkward one of all, the shoe-billed stork. You do not want to know about this, I promise you, it's gross. Awkward is part of its etymology by the way, along with the words like auklet, ocean, talok, and opoctali. Its leg and torso markings are also reminiscent of the shield and patterns commonly depicted with these two deities. Which leads into our next Pokemon, and our first fully evolved one at that. Koshin evolves into Sharblatraz. Sharblatraz is another amalgamation of birds, but really leaning into the look of the wandering albatross. An ocean bird with the largest wingspan of any bird, reaching up to 12 feet in length, which is like a little more than 2 Ms. There's also a myth that these birds never land after they take flight, which is kinda true. They travel across the southern oceans and rarely see land or soil, but they can still sit on top of the ocean to sleep or rest. But enough about birds. The Aztec gods, Talok and Opoctali, both have some kind of affinity towards water. Talok's domain consists of storms, rain, and water in general, so for a Pokemon that thrives under rainy and stormy conditions, it worked quite well. But then there's the Opoctali, a much lesser known god that's often seen as a hunter and an inventor. The Aztecs worshipped him, believing he invented several fishing tools like the net, atlatl, and some records saying that he even made the harpoon. So there's a lot of tools and weapons associated with this guy. And as many of you may know, there's a pattern amongst water starters that each one has an inspiration taken from some kind of weapon or warrior. Blastoise has cannons, Samurott has guns, Primarina, well, it's a bard or something? I don't know. It's not exactly the most solid of the starters, but I still like it. So Sharblatraz is like a harpoon spear guy with its sharp beak, and it dives into water, stabbing prey to catch and eat. Yeah, Sharblatraz will rocket down from the sky and into the water, spearing its prey with its sharp, hooked beak. Though the hook is just kind of aesthetic, it's a little too big to be an actual hook, but it looks pretty cool. The entire line even has a hook-shaped pattern behind their eye, like the streaks in the same position as the crested auklet. I'm so smart. And if it dives into the water like that, it has to have some kind of safety covering for its eyes. So the oils from its head feathers, which are also inspired by the Opoctali's headdress, will mix with air and separate the water to make an air mask around its eyes. This mask is also similar to that of the masks worn by pilots of F-18 fighter jets. The ones that used to keep from, dying at such a high altitude and speed. And you know I had to take a plane concept a step further, so I took the idea of a World War II plane and turned it into a stereotypical aircraft people think whenever they hear the term fighter jet. Neat! Its body is shaped similar to the F-18 as well. It even has feathers under its wings that can be fired like missiles. Maybe there's a new move there, like a flying type water shuriken, but it's feather missiles? Yeah, why not? Let's call it feather missiles. They'd be shaped like raindrops to keep that theming relevant, along with several markings on its body having the same pattern, like the one on its head feather that vaguely resembles a military beret. And holy hell do a lot of air forces use blue berets, not just in the West Hemisphere, but all over! But moving away from that crazy coinkydink, seriously, that wasn't planned, that was just really convenient. Its tail feathers mimic an Aztec hairdress that would have been woven from grass or feathers actually, so that's why I wanted to include it. Oh, and I almost forgot the name again. But this one is kind of a mouthful, so here it goes. It's a sharp, harpoon-shaped beaked albatross that crosses with Talak and Opoctli from Aztec mythos. The harpy eagle is also a bird in Central and South America with fun head feathers, but I'm bad at segues. Wait, Segway? That's also the name of a vertical scooter thing, right? With two big tires? Oh, well you want to see what else has a tire? It's Cobra Boa, and the fully evolved form of Koilash. It went from a normal tire to one that's on fire, and now one that's putting off noxious smoke because it's being burned. Hence the dual poison type. Seriously, don't burn tires or any kind of rubber for that matter. It smells awful, and it's highly dangerous to breathe in. Like carbon dioxide. Pretty much any combustion-based engine, or anything that burns really, will make carbon dioxide, CO2 for short. It gets put off by things like cars, fires, other kinds of vehicles, energy conglomerates like pumping poisonous gas into the air because it makes them more money than switching to something safer and renewable that won't eventually doom us all. But back to fun monster snake! Carbon is a part of its name, along with car, coral snake, which was explained earlier, cobra, Ouroboros, and boa. Cars make sense due to the similar components Cobra Boa has compared to car engines and tires. It'll still roll around recklessly, though now most of its body is unprotected, not having a rubber covering like Koilash or a barrier of fire like Sirpigeon. Also making this weird smog air cushion it can roll on without getting cuts or abrasions, and even inadvertently creating a dangerous poison type that's similar to rollout called Burnout. It would be much stronger, but would only last 3 turns or so, having a chance to burn or poison the target. Either one of the exhaust pipes on its head or tail can send out this black smoke, along with it coming from its mouth and under its rubber-like hoods. It's Cobra-like hoods. A Cobra Pokemon with vehicle and engine designs has smoke coming from under the hood. Like when your car's broken. I am way too proud of that. Some shallower design points to look at though are the road paint patterns on its superior hood, while the hood itself resembles a bike seat. Then there's the road rash skin around its eyes, making its whole head similar to a motorcycle helmet and visor. All in all, I'm super happy with this design, and I just have one last thing to talk about before moving on. While I was designing Cobra Boa, I couldn't find a pose I was happy with that was similar to its pre-evolved forms being all rolled up and tire-like. I struggled with that for a while before I remembered the myth about the Ouroboros. A dragon or serpent-like creature that originated in ancient Egypt and has the distinct ability to devour its own tail. It represents infinity and wholeness in that way. So instead of making it a hoop snake like its pre-evolved forms, its body is posed in the shape of the infinity symbol. I love that detail! And I loved it even more when I found out about the world serpent in Norse mythology. It's an Ouroboros as well, wrapping its body around Midgard, Earth, and literally strangling the planet like a boa constrictor does to its prey, or what the gas from Cobra Boa can do to its victims. Anyway, let's keep going with the mythology dump. The Nemean lion from Greek mythology was this ferocious monster with indestructible golden fur and claws that could slash through anything. It was the lion beast that Heracles defeated, by the way. And when you already have a lion with a lightning mane, and lightning is usually depicted with yellow or gold, the pieces fall into place pretty quickly. So now we have Thunderor, the fully evolved form of Sabercore, and the fully evolved form of Splinteron. It's a lion-like Pokemon with massive wooden saber-toothed tiger teeth, and lightning enwrapping its head and claws like the Nemean lion. And it has a very simple name, just being Thunder and Roar. Names are hard, okay? I did well with the others. Anyway, did you know the trope of warriors wearing animal pelts most likely started with Heracles as he adorned the skin of the Nemean lion? So tell me, did you know that? Well, I didn't until after I designed Thunderor. In fact, I didn't even know what the Nemean lion was. You'd be surprised how often I make really good connections on accident like this. But back to the concept at hand. Tigers have been a major part of this Pokemon's design from the very beginning. And they were the original inspiration for the lightning jutting from the head and claws. Tigers also create a special chemical from their paws whenever they claw at trees, and it's a much less disgusting way to mark their territory. And the slashes they make are very similar to lightning strike scars in trees. Pretty convenient. But what about the lightning mane? Well, for one, it looks cool, and the second reason is from the electricity that's jutting from its forehead, relating back to how the pain receptors as a Splinton never worked right. And now all that minuscule energy has collected, and it's blasting out all at once. It's like how some headaches are caused by a weird electrical imbalance in your brain, and that's why it looks so grumpy. It's just got a big old electrical headache. But a second inspiration this came from was the theory that saber-toothed tigers would attempt to fight each other and deliver a death blow to the middle of their skulls with their teeth. Lots of their skulls have been found with these holes in them, so it's pretty possible that's the case. And I mean, come on, that's super cool, let's be honest. I mean, just trying to bite your opponent, just jabbing through the top of their head, that's metal. Or grass in this case. That was a bad joke. But first and foremost, this Pokemon is still based off the Splinter Cat. So said teeth wouldn't be grass, they'd be giant wooden bark splinter things that are like teeth. And same thing for the whiskers too. They're the same ones that got buried in its face when it was a Splinton, but now they've actually become a part of the body, and it can just ram into Pokemon and just poke them. It's like cats rubbing up against you, except, you know, their whiskers are sharp wood. And other than that, the only thing left to cover is like the lightning bolt stripes that it already shares with Sabercore, and, well, that's it for the starters. Well, individually at least. If we look at all three lines, they do share the starter pattern theory. That being all grass types are based off extinct megafauna, water starters being based off of weapons or warrior class like I previously mentioned, and the fire starter being based off of the Chinese zodiac. Or, you know, it was until this little guy. I still love him though. And those patterns are consistent here too. Here we have a saber-toothed tiger, a harpoon spear thing, and a snake. But something else I wanted to mention is that I wanted each starter to be based off some myth, legend, or god. I wanted this game concept story to have a lot to do with the stories that have been passed down from generation to generation. So I thought imbuing the starters with myths, legends, and folklore would be a really good idea. But what do you guys think of my starters? Do you love them because none of them are fur bait? Do you hate them because they're new? Or are you indifferent? Say so in the comments after you like and subscribe. And trust me, you're going to want to do that so you don't miss a single video about Pokemon Terrestrial Takeover. I've wanted to do a project like this for so long, and now I'm finally doing it. So guys, like I said, please like, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thank you.